migration governance and okay, I would have to say that again for the record. You are all welcome to the official launch or the opening day of the certificate program on migration governance and diaspora engagement that is hosted by 4 institutions, and we will be hearing more about them. We have a very tight program today. We're hoping to keep you here for at least an hour and a half. And so we, with a lot of content loaded in it, very happy that we could have the different participants join us. We're at 144, which is fantastic. And also to just say to those, to just check if our main speakers are here. I don't know if I could just, Larissa, do we have Dr. Manke here with us? And also just to, Larissa, are you able to confirm that?
Yes, she will be joining in 1 minute.
In a minute or so. No, okay, that is great. But otherwise, my name is Paddy Siyanga Knudsen, and I am part of one of the organizations, so the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, and I will be your moderator for today's event. You are all welcome. Thank you to everyone who has raised their flag and names and shared contact details also in the chat. Keep it lively. We're very happy that you're here. I see hands are still coming up. And unfortunately, we'd had to close with the greeting session because we need to get into our program. And with that, without much further ado, I'd like to call upon Professor Binod Khadria, who is the president of the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, to give us a welcome remark. Professor.
Thank you, Paddy. I think that could not have been a better start than this, with some of the participants interacting and letting us know how interested they are and where they are from. So I would formally welcome my dear participants and friends. It is a privilege to welcome you all to this opening session of the 6-month certificate program on migration governance and diaspora engagement. It is also my honor to welcome Dr. Marina Manke, the IOM head of Labor Mobility and Development Division, Human Development Division, who would be delivering the inaugural speech. I stand here on behalf of the 4 organizations that have put together this program. These organizations are, of course, the GRFDT, to which I belong, and iDIASPORA, and then we have ADEPT and the CISAN. So you can see the stretch of the coverage of the organizations. GRFDT stands for Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, and it is a consortium of researchers and policymakers on the subject, as well as a think tank to have interactions at the national and international level. Then we have iDIASPORA. Of course, I tend to wonder what I should stand for. And I'm told that it stands, of course, in the present context, perhaps for the internet. But I tend to think that it is a singular person. I am the diaspora, and which actually tends to make us together we diaspora. So probably we'll transit to we diaspora one day. And then we have ADEPT, the Africa Europe Diaspora Development Platform. We would hear more about these organizations in the course of our program. Also about the CISAN, which is Center for Research on North America at the Autonomous University, National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM. So I would be very brief, since as Paddy has mentioned, we are, we are having this session as a preface to actual teaching session or interaction session. So we have a shortage of time. I would like to say that this program, this 6-month program, is actually an amalgamation of our earlier ventures with another certificate program on GCM objectives that we just now heard from one of the participants, that the timing, whether the timing is clashing, because we are repeating that GCM program, certificate program, this time also, but with a difference. It is deeper than that and wider than the last year's program. So we have 2 parallel programs running, and you will see that there is give and take between that program and this certificate program. So I'm very happy to notice this because particularly these things evolved from, not only the GCM objectives program that we ran last year, but also a series of 3 workshops, if I may call it that. Larissa would probably permit me to say that, on diaspora engagement through trust, resource mobilization, and sustainability. I will not go and elaborate onto these issues because we certainly will have more opportunity and scope to go into the details of these ones. But I would say that it is my honor again to just share with you my views on the title or the subject of this particular certificate program: migration, governance, and diaspora engagement. I think before we understand governance, we need to understand migration. And certainly that would be the beginning with today's session itself after the inaugural session. But governance is a very generic term. And I tend to think that if governance is not there, then what could it be? Could it be just absence of governance, or it could be misgovernance? So we need to think in terms of thesis and antithesis. And that, I think, probably should run through our program this time, because we need to have critical thinking. It should not be one-way learning, but a learning across the space and time and regions that we represent. So that is what I think is very, very important. And I would like to also tend to think that what does it mean to have diaspora engagement? What is diaspora? What is diaspora has now become a very generic term, because earlier we used to know that diaspora represented people without a homeland, particularly the Jewish people. But now we include all migrants under the rubric of diaspora. However, I would still tend to think that diaspora, if we think in terms of the new citizens of an host country, then certainly the diasporas are better off than migrants, but worse off than the citizens. We hear the term second-class citizens. So many times we'll find that the diaspora tend to become second-class citizens. And that's where I think the diaspora engagement needs to address our issues. And that actually touches a very core of the issues that are concerned in terms of human mobility and settlement, and that is racial discrimination. It reminds me of the movement, the Black Lives Matter, or I would say all colors matter. We need to think like that, and we need to remember who were the victims of perpetration against these kind of philosophies of all colors matter. So I would say that diaspora engagement will involve race relations through building trust, mobilizing resources, and mobilizing and consolidating resources, and of course, ensuring stability, because governance must be stable. It cannot be that governance would be one day and then next day you do not have stability in that. So that's where I think we need to think together. And this is an opportunity where I welcome you all again. And with this, I hand it over back to Paddy to have the rest of the program, please. Thank you.
Professor Binod, thank you very much. And I'm sure this is not the last time for the students in the room that you will hear from Professor Binod. If you would like to hear more, I think one interesting place is Google. If you Google his name, many resources come up, including being the co-editor for the World Migration Report, which is a flagship report of the International Organization for Migration. And with that, I would like to introduce our keynote inaugurate speaker for today, Dr. Marina Manke. I hope I've pronounced your last name correctly, who is the head of the Labor Mobility and Human Development Division in the Department of Migration Management at the International Organization for Migration. And she joins us here today also as a very well-known author. Some of her flagship publications, some of her publications include, flagship publications that have gone out, such as Sharing Data, Where to Start, Migration Profiles, Making the Most of the Process. And I highlight these deliberately because we are in the mode of learning, and therefore some of these resources we'll be able to touch on. Dr. Manke advises governments, private sector, academia, and civil society on all matters of migration, and she has also managed to manage large-scale technical cooperation programs with different donors, including Switzerland, the United States, the European Union, among others. Another interesting aspect of her bio is the diversity that she holds in terms of the boards and the committees that she sits on. So she is sitting in committees including the Global Skills Partnership for Migration with ILO, ITUC, IOE, UNESCO, as well as other UN collaborations within the UN Network on Migration. Deliberate mentions, because these are some of the reference points that you will hear about either from resource people coming from these organizations. And therefore, I think without much further ado, we are glad to welcome our inaugurate speech by Dr. Marina Manke. Marina, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paddy, and welcome everyone. I don't think my speech will be so formal or so inaugural. It sounds maybe more serious than what I thought I would share with you ahead of your program. Plus, Professor Binod said it very clearly, we don't have a lot of time. And I know that the speaker after me, Professor Tigau, will be also presenting the program itself. So let me maybe just spontaneously reflect or react to some of the Professor Binod's questions which he posed, and then say a few words, of course, how we perceive this initiative and why we think it's such a great one and why we are supporting it from our end. Indeed, we have here among the co-organizers of this program, iDIASPORA, which is basically a digital venue initiative of our organization, International Organization for Migration, which we represent. Because the whole spirit of the iDIASPORA, when you spoke about what does stand for, Professor Binod, I was thinking that indeed we created that brand as the iPhone, iPad, iDIASPORA, but in terms of the digital space, placing the discourse, the work on migration, human mobility, which is all about transnationalism, tapping into initiatives of communities, organizations, partners situated across the world. So our agenda is really multinationalism. The agenda is it's no longer, even though migration is perceived as a national matter, in reality, migration, human mobility is crossing borders. So and the solutions come when we address this topic of supporting migrants, developing good governance approaches. That's what we refer to when we speak about migration governance together within the corridor in regional ecosystems. That's why internet digital platforms are so crucial. But again, is about also the contribution of each single stakeholder, including diaspora individuals, because diaspora is not a mixture of structured stakeholders. It's so different depending on the level of skills, depending of really how much strong the feeling is of attachment to the country of origin. So IAM defines diaspora, and it's interesting. Absolutely, we have been, we have our glossary, the latest iteration in 2019. Usually we go critically assess all the definitions we are proposing to the international community. And that's a definition which is very challenging to capture, because actually, interestingly, different governments are advocating for their own understanding of diaspora. I was attending some of the meetings where governments were actually fighting for specific communities, saying, no, this is our diaspora. No, this is actually our diaspora. So it's great that now the realization is that there are strong partners who really are there to help, who are not necessarily the ones from whom we can get something, but really working together. And that's why this initiative of this certificate program for us is so interesting, because it is really a grassroots initiative. It's really something which not coming from IAM as we are designing. No, this has been co-designed among all the partners whom we bring together, and we are really fully endorsing this collaborative approach. We're bringing our experts for different topics, but that's why it's really absolutely exciting. I'm so thrilled, and let me just show a few points in terms of how we reached where we are in terms of the process of organizing this event. But before, is also one point that I forgot to mention is, of course, the topic of trust. I think it's absolutely crucial. The trust between partners, between diaspora communities is absolutely, that's what we speak about when we speak about engaging, collaborating, co-creation. Okay, so what is the program? So I see that it is a joint initiative of really putting on the table all the knowledge we have about migration governance and diaspora engagement, but at the same time remaining very critical when we are presenting this information. We have multiple resources put together. Thank you, Paddy, for referring to some of the ones I helped to create. But for instance, one of the latest initiatives that we have is, if you are aware about Essentials of Migration Management 2004 resource. So we are revamping it. We're actually launching it as a EMM 2.0, which will become an electronic platform of sharing knowledge and creating some sort of training methodology using digital technologies. So there are multiple, so we're bringing different experts from all the partners together, and then we are engaging with the students in an interactive manner to ensure that we present knowledge, but also we co-create or stress test some of the assumptions which we have, the way how we already started today. So it will be an interaction of 6 months. So it's a solid program. So it's a certified approach. Again, I'll let the colleagues then clarify what it means in reality. But from our end, so we also are amazed to see such a reaction and interest of participating in this program. So I understand that we have received around 600 applicants to take part in this program, and we will have students from 89 countries. So it's in truly global participation. So Asia, America, Africa, Europe. So the courses again are embracing all the different notions. You spoke about some of the global processes, and maybe just a few words about the historical moment where we are. As you know, with the adoption of the Global Compact for Migration in December 2018, so of course there is now an international framework which is setting up parameters of regulating mobility, but also collaboration, international collaboration on migration. The Global Compact for Migration, with its 23 objectives, we speak about it as being a 360-degree covering all aspects of human migration, human mobility regulation. And if you look into the objectives, they range from traditionally dear to our heart topics like engagement with diaspora, skills recognition, labor mobility facilitation, ethical recruitment, but also the objectives go very, very deep into nitty-gritty of regulative aspects like, you know, border management, like return, and including forced return. Some of the topics we are not very comfortable in discussing, but I think again we need to be open and looking into all those mechanisms which exist from the public sector, and always be coming back with feedback, maybe or for improvement of solutions or for sharing good practices, with an understanding that there are different instruments and different interests at play. So how do we come back with the best solution, and again keep the focus on the rights of migrants, on the best case scenario for specific individual. The latest initiatives, indeed priorities from our end, and I'll stop there because again we are short for time, but within our programmatic or thematic policy area, so we are advocating for the importance of skills mobility partnerships. So we really want to see that migration responses are no longer just based on the right or identity responses, but really incorporate the whole human capital dimension. So the skills becomes very crucial, and it requires alignment between migration policy, but also other sectors. So collaboration between migration authorities, but also education, ministries of education, ministries of labor, to come together and to ensure that nobody's left behind. Of course, the COVID-19, I'm sure during the course there will be a lot of focus on some of the vulnerabilities which have been exposed during the pandemic, and these are serious issues which we are aware about that. But again, how do we find the practical solutions to some of these challenges, like informality? We know that in Latin America, governments started going through the regularization campaigns and really taking some bold decisions in offering documentation to third country nationals who actually have not necessarily entered their country in a regular manner. So these experiences of finding a solution despite challenges and as driven from the pandemic context. So this will, I'm sure, will be also discussed with your students in the courses. So of course, the context, which is beyond priorities within migration governance, the whole Agenda 2030 remains crucial for us. We are in the last decade of action, of acceleration, of implementation. Unfortunately, the pandemic threw us backwards for especially our category of beneficiaries, migrants and displaced population groups. So, but how do we deliver on SDGs despite all those challenges and really continue bringing migration governance as a cross-cutting topic? We know it's in the goal 10 of SDGs, but it's not only there, even though explicitly it's there, but human mobility is relevant for so many other spheres like trade. Migration and trade becomes also something we would like to find concrete, tangible entry points and see what is the relevance of our partners and how to deliver on some of the priorities like regional integration in Africa, African Free Trade Continental Agreement. So for us, it's a very crucial driving force moving forward. Let me pause here and stop here. Again, congratulations to the partners and welcome to all the students who are joining us, and wishing success, and we'll be monitoring closely on the results, and we'll take lessons learned and see how to take it forward. Oh, and I see already some comments in Russian coming to my way. Okay, yes,
Oh.
I do speak Russian. I'll let me address those.
I think somebody may have read your bio, Dr. Manke. Marina, thank you very much for those remarks that have really ushered us in, into this program and giving us a lot of energy. I liked, the boldness that we have for it, the uncomfortable, being critical, looking back, but also really thinking about how do we build better forward to accelerate the progress towards what we have put ahead as for the SDGs. So that's very important in sort of also bringing along migration governance in all different aspects. Some would also say we should start from education, and we've seen what COVID-19 has had an impact, for instance, on on migrants and cross references there with the education sphere. So thank you very much for ushering us in. And with that, let me just ask Professor Camelia Tigau and Dr. Rakesh Ranjan to come and give us, a flavor of what this program is about. We've heard, bits of it, by the different speakers. And Professor Camelia is coming from CISAN, which is the Center for Research on North America. And that's part of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. So the Americas are well represented, and I see them in the room as well, which is great. Good morning to you. And Dr. Rakesh Ranjan is from GRFDT. And you will hear these two names, and particularly also Dr. Rakesh, because he is the man behind the Google Classroom. So if you want to know more about what's happening, don't ask me. I can talk a lot about migration governance, but I can't talk too much about IT systems and how the classroom would work. So over to you, Professor Tigau, to just kick us off.
Yes, thank you, Paddy. Well, I would like to welcome everybody in the name of the organizing committee and congratulate all the students who have been accepted. As you see, we've had a lot of participation to get into this course. Maybe each one of the three people who applied were accepted. I know some of you are fellow colleagues from universities. I know you will return the knowledge that you will acquire here. I would have to say that this program is not just global, it has also the virtue of being a hybrid exercise of scientific diplomacy. We involve, of course, an official type of cooperation, which is iDIASPORA, a think tank, such as the GRFDT, a civil society organization, ADEPT, and CISAN as an academic institution. So we are merging here today in this type of synergy, global and local, official and non-official, involving actors from different continents to offer a special insight to migration governance that also pictures the perspective of each one of the actors involved. So this is just this is not just public-private cooperation, but a more sophisticated type of knowledge that we are trying to offer here. And also the type of tutoring that you will receive is very wide, coming from each one of the institutions involved. And now I will speak about the structure of the course with a composition that we have prepared since May this year, and with the previous experience of the GSM certificate. We have selected carefully all the speakers, the lectures who may help you understand what is migration governance today in 2021, an updated view on migration governance, and why we need to study this field for improving the world we live in our own regions. So with this purpose, we invited around 40 migration experts around the world to give you the big picture of the topic and what migration governance is, but also how it should look like in the future. The course, as you know, is divided in 11 blocks that take you by hand from the basics on how to understand international migrations, diasporas, to explore the classical nexus between migration and development, migration policy, migration governance, multilateral organizations. And of course, we are aware that you all come from different backgrounds, from arts, from migration, from sociology. Some of you are even come from hard sciences. So this course is meant to teach and revise where migration data and statistics are, what are some of the basic stipulations on international and regional migration law, such as the GCM, how to map migration policies in your own country. And we, of course, include a block of speakers on crisis and humanitarian response. We take the risk of using the term crisis to study migration, while many of the scholars have outlined that the crisis that does not belong to migrants or to the migration process, but to the political realm. We do believe that it is necessary to delve into these personal tragedies that bad migration governance may entail. And finally, our course will close with a more purposeful approach on how diasporas engage in development, trying to be optimistic. What is their contribution to the countries of origin and destination? Now, the world may seem little from here. We say in Spanish, a handkerchief. But we are aware that the technologies that not solve time zones. So some of you may find it a challenge in the hours to attend, Thursdays and Saturdays, mornings, afternoon, or even night in Australia. We are very grateful for your effort to be here with us, to listen to the conferences, write essays, interact with colleagues. With time, we also hope you are able to establish networks and above all, make friends from other parts of the world who of course have different and sometimes opposite views on migration. I believe as a migrant myself that studying migration is a personal challenge of reflecting on minorities, on the otherness, and finally on our own prejudices and place in the world. It is the one window that opens to the political, economic, cultural, emotional geography of the world, put it whatever adjective you like. So just to end my participation, we are offering this course for free, which means a lot of human resources and time will be invested to give you around 120 hours of conference and interaction, apart from our constant availability to read your works, to revise and share our thoughts. This is a voluntary work for a genuine interested to learn. So this is also a type of social contract we are signing here with you today in terms of mutual responsibility towards the course. So that said, I wish you all a very good course on migration, and I will now pass the floor to Rakesh Ranjan, who is the technical heart and soul of GRFDT and one of our chief organizers. Please, Rakesh.
Thank you, Professor Camelia. Am I audible?
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. I'm actually feeling extremely happy to speak with you and to attend this inaugural session. We have been working hard since last 4 or 5 months, and we are actually, this hard work can be seen with the participation of students from different parts of the world. We have prepared one slide just to show our participation, student participation from different parts of the world. This map is not able to capture all the countries, actually, I can say, but you can see fairly we have participation from everywhere. I can see we have total 89 countries. People are from all parts of the world, and you can see the numbers are not going to one place only. Numbers are quite like we have participation from all continents in the world. So this is something I wanted to share with all the participants and also with other organizers. We have very good gender participation. We have 53% male and 47% female. So this is also great. And again, for education, we have people from PhDs, we have masters, we have graduation. Then also we have, I have merged with graduation and masters, but people from different skill sets, different education, different qualifications, different certificates. So what I want to say, we have participation from different parts of the world. We have people from different gender, male, female, and then again we have from different educational background. I expect things will be quite vibrant. We'll have good time. Next 6 months will be quite comprehensive, quite engaging. On technical term, because we have to complete the certificate programs in a highly and most effective and efficient manner. I request all the participants to consider few things, which I'll just say. I hope all of you have already joined Google Classroom. Google Classroom is only official medium to interact and discuss. So all the updates will be shared in the Google Classroom. All the lecture schedule, all the timing, all the documents, all the resource materials, all the assignments, everything will be sharing in Google Classroom. So I request don't rely on notifications from Google Classroom. Rather, you have to check Google Classroom quite frequently, at least once or twice every day, so that you will be updated and you will have all the information. Telegram is there, but that will be for emergency purposes. We are not using Telegram for all the communications. But like for example, just to share meeting link, other things we can share on Telegram. But Telegram is not official medium. Google Classroom is official medium. When you attend this Zoom webinars every Saturday and Thursday, you consider we have 43 events, like we'll have 43 webinars. So what I request, and I have been requesting this for to participants of other programs also, don't write ceremonial things. Thank you, your name, your enrollment number, your personal details, you like the comment. Rather use Zoom chat box as an option to discuss, to give comments, to ask questions, to elaborate on something or to share something. This thank you, your name, we all know we will be in the classroom for 6 months, and we have sufficient time to know each other in the Google Classroom. Google Classroom is open. Everyone can post. Everyone can inform others about their background, their geographical background, educational background, anything, whatever they want, most academic. But that option is there. But Zoom is not that option. Last thing about attendance. Don't ask for attendance form. The session is for 90 minutes. One of the organizer will share attendance link anytime, and that time will not be telling you, because we expect you to be there in the classroom in the Zoom for the entire 90 minutes. Anytime we'll share the the attendance link in the chat box. You just need to click on that link, submit, select your name. You need not to write anything. Just select your name, select your enrollment number, and write your email ID, and just submit. This is our work, how we are calculating your attendance. But that 90 minutes is like minimum time for you to attend the session. If you are not attending for entire 90 minutes, then you will be not present. If you are attending 90 minutes and above, then you will be present. So these things are there. I'll not, we have many things, like we have lecture, unit 1 lecture coming. So these 3 things are important. That's why I'm discussing here. Other things I'll be posting in the Google, we'll be posting in the Google Classroom. So thank you again. Let's make this opportunity, let's make this certificate program beneficial for us and also for all the participants. So thank you, everyone.
Rakesh, thank you very much. And indeed, you will hear more. And I think it's great to have this global village. That also means that we need some very common tools. And thank you also, Professor Camelia, for mentioning, what the terms of this social contract are like and the importance of interaction. Because like we always say, lecturers, resource persons, and the students all come to provide you are bodies of knowledge. So there is a learning that you bring across. And so we're looking forward to your lively participation. And with that, and knowing that we have, delayed slightly on our program, but for important reasons, and for us to get into this, I would like to introduce Dr. Raj, who is from GRFDT, who is also joining us today, and she will be moderating the next session. Dr. Raj, let me hand over to you. I think you need to unmute.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paddy. Now, because we have limited time and Professor Rakesh, we are going to introduce, I have my pleasure to introduce Professor Rakesh to give a lecture on Unit 1, which is on concepts and important terminologies. I will very briefly introduce him because his bio is already there on your program. Professor Rakesh is the director of the Regents Center for Transnational Studies in Bristol University in the UK. And he has a PhD in geography, and his research focuses on transnational marketing, transnational consumers, human mobility, migration and remittances, as you can see, the whole areas of migration and transnationalism or diaspora. He has a number of publications to his credit, including a number of books. And now, without much ado, I'm going to invite Professor Rakesh to speak on the lecture that we have, the topic, which is concepts and important terminologies in relation to the program that we are offering you. Thank you. Professor Rakesh.
Thank you very much, Raj, and all team at GDFRT for the invitation. And I'm really pleased and happy to be part of this exciting venture program, training program. I should maybe, do a little bit, correction there. So I worked at the University of Bristol a long time ago, but I moved on and I was at Regent's University London for a while. Now I'm working at various universities and leading the International British Business School. So as you heard, I mean, my expertise is human mobility, migration, and anything and everything to do with migration, ranging from marketing, consumers to remittances. Today, I mean, my brief was to give a seminar on key terminologies and theories of migration, or conceptualizations in this sense. And it is a topic I pretty much like, I should admit. I have my own very critical views of migration scholarship, which I have been studying, reading, and contributing for the last 3 decades almost. And now, without any further introductions, I should just jump into the topic. First, let's start with the with the terminology. I'm with my good friend and colleague Jeff Cohen from Ohio State University. We have discussed some years ago, it's almost like 10 years now, maybe more than 10 years. We have discussed like what is wrong with migration terminology per se altogether, because it was a time, as one of our colleagues early on talked about crisis and migration crisis. It was Camelia, I think. She said that, or one other colleague. The beauty is, I like to say there is always crisis. Crisis never goes away. I mean, the norm is crisis. It is like, unhappy people or unhappiness is everywhere. Only happiness comes and goes, once in a while. So it is similar. Like we have a crisis of migration policy, actually. Of course, it's not migrants, the crisis, source of crisis. But migration is an outcome of crisis, and many many crises have seen massive migration flows or massive in their own, context at least. So in like late 90s, I can talk about the UK where I am based. In late 90s, early 2000s, it was like, everybody was happy about migration. Nobody was talking about migration per se. So it was a relatively growing economy. Everybody was making good, so it was okay to have migrants, asylum seekers, refugees. Nobody really bothered. Then, kind of like mid 2000s, we have started talking about bogus asylum seeker. It started to be, populating tabloid newspapers and so on. Then we have seen at that time, like economic migrants were okay, but those bogus, I mean, quote unquote, asylum seekers were the problem. Then in 2015, perhaps you remember, suddenly this temporal terminology shifted. Then we have seen like, oh, these, poor refugees, we have to, embrace and help and so on. But the economic migrants were really like, no good. So that was kind of like shifting axis in terms of discourses. But when you think about it, every time we see such, war or conflict or major violent event somewhere, we start talking about, oh, migration crisis. Like, so we have these crises like pretty much forever. And the reactions to these crises are also kind of repeating themselves. Now we had a pretty tragic period of, government in US with Trump. And he made migration #1 topic as if it was not already. And he talked about the wall, the other side of the wall, inside the wall, etc. And it was a horrible thing. I had a horrible time to hear all these, discourses becoming kind of mainstream. But when you think about the history of migration, it is not new. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt, 100 years ago, were pretty much making same kind of noises. Of course, the subject of the discussion was more like, German, Polish, Italian, Norwegian, or Finnish migrants, not so much of Muslims or South Asians. But we had similar attitudes, like repeatedly showing themselves across the history. So that is one thing. So all these discourses actually made migration, I mean, migration, migrant, immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker, all these words became kind of like dirty words, swear words. So if you want to swear somebody, you can easily say bloody immigrant, you know, so that works. So this was kind of like initial ideas we talked about with Jeff, and then we tried to come up with something better. And this was one side of the story. The other side is when you think about migration as a word, the meaning of it, it is like often, I mean, if not always, referring to a clear-cut movement from a point A to point B. So, but when you look at all the literature we have created, built, and all the experiences, migrants, I mean, ourselves, we are migrants as well, and other migrant stories, of course, migration is not really a move from point A to point B. It is more an open-ended process. And this was realized long ago, actually. If you look at late 80s or 90s literature, you will find like increasingly scholars of the field of the topic, it was, you know, much smaller community at the time, talking about emphasizing that it is a process. Migration is a process. If you Google that, you know, that phrase, you would see it goes up to like 1990s. So that was part of the problem. So what we can do, we thought, okay, like there, you know, English language is quite rich, and many other languages are even richer. So you can find better words. So there is, if you are a demographer, I studied demography, I left it halfway through, then moved on to population geography, but similar, you know, terminology is shared there. So like population movement, that is, you know, migration. So population movement is a dynamic, you know, term explaining movement like as a process and open-ended process more so. Similarly, we have another word, mobility. Of course, it is more often used as part of social mobility, but mobility is again just underlining the action, moving from one place to another, then to another, then to another, but it is again emphasizing that process, dynamic nature of it. So also you can use movement, just movement as a word instead of migration or other derivatives. And that was kind of our solution. And we started using this like movement, population movement, and movers and non-movers as kind of like alternative terminologies. I'm just throwing these in, just, you know, for those who are new to migration or not so new to migration scholarship can think of and take further. I mean, these are our humble, you know, modest ideas, you know, to share with. But there is more to do about this, and we believe it captures the tone, what we are looking at better. Now, let me move on to the conceptualization, theories of migration. Obviously, most people who are interested in migration are familiar with one very basic model, very simplistic model, push-pull. So everybody, you know, when you talk about migration, everybody says, oh, it is push-pull, it is push-pull. And if you are teaching migration anywhere, you will see in your student papers, you know, A to Z, everything is about push-pull. There is a reason for that push-pull, because I have been teaching in business schools, management schools for, you know, 20 years. And in business and management, one thing, like for practice and for theory, you know, for academia, we love using very simple forms, frameworks, models. So you have all these like abbreviations, SWOT, PASTEL, 4 Cs, 5 Cs, whatever Cs, 7 Ps, 4 Ps, you know, loads of them, you know, full of the literature. So these are very popular because they are very simple. I mean, and because they are very simple, they are obviously very shallow. So same goes for the push-pull model. Of course, we know there are some things pushing you, there are some things attractive to you. But when you see these are presented or, you know, perceived as theories, then we need to say, you know, hold on a second. They are not really there. These are not theories. This is just a simple, you know, framework and, you know, not necessarily fit for all purposes. Anyway, when we look at where it comes from, of course, the culprit for this push-pull model is Lee, Everett Lee, with his articles in 1966 and 1969. He kind of like reformulated what his predecessor, in a sense, Ravenstein, formulated, 130 years ago in 1885 and 1889 in 2 articles published in Royal Statistical Society in Britain. Of course, when you look at the literature criticizing these, you also see some, unfair treatment, I would say, because like when you read the original text, Ravenstein was very clear about what he's talking about. It was looking at migration in England and mainly migration from various rural parts of England to London. So that was a very specific formula and case to look at. And he iterated, this, underlined this aspect very clearly. And later on, further mentioned like it is about this, and there are other moderators of these movements, like regulations, legislations, laws, and so on. So we shouldn't like just jump the wagon to criticize these original initial works. And yet these were very powerful rules. I mean, he looked at whether men or women are more likely to migrate. He looked at whether people from like smaller rural places move up or move to bigger places or not, whether proximity plays a role, transportation links plays a role, etc. Age plays a role. So these principles of migration or laws of migration were important at that time, explaining quite a lot of the phenomena. And now in our contemporary world, these laws of migration are still holding, strong in many respects. However, we moved on, we have improved a lot. And then, of course, after these 2 very key work, we had the review of migration theories and appraisal of international migration theories by Douglas Massey and colleagues, published in Population Development Review in 1993. And later on, he has reiterated and revisited this review in 1998 and later on with Bob Taylor, etc. You can see a lot of these like critical reviews done at the end of 90s and in early 2000s. Of course, these are not proposing new theories. It is just classification of existing models and so on. But it was important to see like, okay, there were some theories explaining initiation of migration and some others explaining how it continues and evolves. I think that was the most important contribution for Doug Massey and colleagues. And of course, the problem is, unfortunately, neither our students nor our colleagues like to read much. So that very good work, very good paper became kind of like a shortcut to do literature review or to discuss the theory of migration. We have seen it kind of like reproduced over and over in much briefer formats by many others later on. And if we do look around 1980s, late 1980s, you would find quite a few other key work criticizing and trying to move on about creating a migration theory, coming up with a holistic theory, maybe we can say. Zollberg, for example, I identified something very important, which I really second, pointed the inequalities, global inequalities, and inequalities in labor markets and so on. That was an important hook to move forward. It was important for me. And we have just finished and submitted a paper, a revised paper to a journal, where we are revisiting an old name in geography, if you are familiar with, August Lösch, a German economic geographer. in 1930s, he has written about migration. He wasn't interested in migration as a key, let's say, key business, main business, but he talked about migration and he identified safety and independence as key drivers of migration. So he argues that migration happens because people desire safety or independence. So like that is kind of a more dynamic and flexible approach to migration, because then you are moving out of your kind of like your neoliberal dominant, migration scholarship of today, and have an opportunity to think like more open-minded thinking. Because at the moment, we look at like mainstream journals and books, you see this kind of like variations of these push-pull models, etc., are kind of like reproduced over and over, and it is quite boring, to be honest. And when you look at these alternative views, perspectives, you can have a better idea that migration actually is not really starting with the destination. So it is not about Germany, it is not about US. Because, I mean, if these rules were really like laws of migration, we would see everybody going to Germany, nowhere else. Or Luxembourg, to be honest, because it is the country with highest GDP and highest salaries and highest everything. So, but it doesn't happen. People move to so many places, and you see millions of people moving from Malawi to Burundi, or Burundi to Rwanda, or many poor countries receive millions of migrants. Or now we see like Syrians all over the place, or we see constant moves between Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. I mean, it's like none of these countries are Germany. So there are other things. So people move with their means, and when they are urged, when they feel really like uncomfortable somewhere. So how we can formulate that? So Lösch talked about safety and independence. So you try to find a safe place. You try to, establish your independence. So independence in this sense explains not only those people coming from relatively poor countries towards, better off countries, but also it is like relative poverty, if you like, or relative insecurity, as I formulate in my work. So that explains why millions of German, pensioners move to places like Spain or Greece or Turkey or Morocco or further afield, or many second or third generation or first generation migrants from these relatively rich countries move to relatively less expensive and relatively poorer countries. So that explains that independence idea comes from that. So those people with their little pot of pensions see that they can have a better life, so they can become independent elsewhere. So that is kind of like overall criticism of what I want to say. I will not just go through the details of all these pre-existing theories, talking about, okay, wage differentials are important. We know it is important. Prosperity levels are important. We know they are important. And households are important in making these decisions, not only individuals. And, I would argue, as would my good colleagues, we work together, that households are often more important than individual making the migration decision in many contexts. So these are really crucial, and we know network theory explains a lot. So why people go to same places, similar places. Destination choice is very much determined by these networks, and networks facilitate migration big time. And similarly, we have like world systems theory explaining quite an important bit of migration, and it is again patching another gap in the theory. So this was kind of the argument what Doug Massey and colleagues brought in with their 93 articles. So they said, okay, I mean, there is no single theory of migration, and they kind of concluded maybe we don't need that kind of a single theory. So we have all these theories, mosaic of models. They explain bits and bobs of migration, so that does the job. But again, we don't have to just accept it and move on. And many of us didn't do that. And we still try to find something better, maybe improve it an inch further. And in recent years, perhaps you have witnessed as well, I have seen quite a lot of work coming and using the aspirations model. My good friend and colleague, Jorgen Carling from Norway, and some others developed this model, aspirations model. Again, it is an interesting model. It looks at the individual agent as a key actor in that. And so, in my opinion, placing too much emphasis on what an individual can or cannot do in terms of following their aspirations and dreams and desires. Because for me, the structural factors are really like dragging us down. Whatever we want to do, we have to deal with where we are sitting in a particular context, particular juncture. We can't just follow our aspirations. And this is evident in many surveys. You would see desire to migrate is often like 3-4 times higher than the number of people who actually move. So that is just part of the story, because there are so many moderators of migration, as we know, and we have so much evidence to go that way. So where I have ended up with all these ideas was a conflict model of migration. I described it, and in conflict model of migration, the emphasis is on several layers actually. One is conflicts. Migration is a function of conflict. So conflict is defined here in terms of in a very broad sense. I'm not talking about just wars like we see in Syria or Afghanistan or Sudan or so many other places, but it is conflicts like very latent conflicts. We are talking about tensions, unwanted situations, discomforts, uncomfortable situations, anything you can think of, conflicting interests coming together, facing, and any challenges facing. So these are kind of creating or leading to perception of insecurity. And that perception of insecurity is the driver of migration. So because perception is important, this is where we are kind of acknowledging the power and authority of the individual or household agent. Agent is important, that perception is important, therefore, because many people live through the same troubles and only some of them move, or only some of them want to move, and even a smaller fraction do move after a while. So that is the difference in terms of perception. So not everybody perceives the same troubles in the same fashion, same way. And of course, then we have another set of moderators, which I describe as 4 C's or 4 capitals. These are determining whether we can move or not as well. But let's stick with the idea of insecurity first. So these insecurities can be in any domain of life. It could be economic insecurity, like losing your job, changing a job, or not making enough, in your small or big or whatever business. Or it could be legal, political challenges, insecurities. You could be part of a religious, ethnic, political, whatever minority, and kind of oppressed or uncomfortable with something. Or you could be like, you could be gay or transgender in a society, in a community where it is not really welcomed or tolerated or whatever. So these are all patterns of migration we can identify and see around the world. People are moving for all these reasons, like, why people are leaving Iran, or, why people are leaving Syria, why people are leaving Turkey. I mean, a few years back, we had this, interview with New York Times. Like, there were 10,000 Turkish millionaires left Turkey suddenly. So, like, why these people? They were so rich and, resourceful. Why did they leave? Why we had like another, 75,000 Turkish entrepreneurs ending up in the UK in the last 4 years. So these are showing like people's perceptions are important in making these decisions. Plus, different domains of life can, pose challenges and insecurities, become source of insecurity. And it doesn't have to be all these, grand grounds, but it could be like you can be an artist, happen to be born in a, stupid small village where you can't really prosper, do anything. So then you have to move somewhere to a big city nearby, or to London, to Paris, to Istanbul, to New York, somewhere you can fulfill those aspirations. I only accept the aspiration model in this context when it becomes an insecurity for you where you are. So this is how the conflict model is trying to see the dynamic nature of migration. The dynamism comes from the perception of insecurities can change, evolve as you move. Like, insecurity for Syrians 10 years ago was a different insecurity, or different at least degree of level of insecurity 10 years ago than it is now. And when they move to Turkey, they are facing another, like the insecurity changes. It is not Assad or his army killing you, but you are in a relatively hostile society where refugees are not really welcome. You can, find excuses for that, but that is insecurity. This is why we have seen in 2015-16, suddenly about 800,000 of them, throw themselves into sea to reach Greek shores and, further to Austria and Germany. So these insecurities change. In our own experiences, you can find more, examples for that too. I mean, you can, look at migrants, how they move. They move to certain places, then they do another, make another move to another country. Now we have seen, for example, after Brexit in the UK, pretty much over 1 million European Union citizens left. They went to other European countries or further afield. So that means that they faced an insecurity. Brexit created an insecurity for them. It was more a political and economic insecurity. And of course, it was personal insecurity as well, because we have seen attacks on European citizens in and around that Brexit referendum period. So we have seen similar things with the COVID in earlier months. As you may remember, Trump labeled it as Chinese virus. And then we have seen, that was shared by quite a lot of right-wing leaders around the world. And we have seen Chinese friends and neighbors getting attacked, physically attacked, I'm talking about. So this is just showing us how dynamic are these insecurity perceptions could be. And that will determine your decision to move and move again, move back, or remigrate. So that is how we see migration, and how we can see migration in a more dynamic fashion, which is the true nature of human mobility. Otherwise, we wouldn't see those, people who move to UK to settle and, retire and die here in the NHS. But we have suddenly seen millions of them going back or moving to somewhere else. So that is kind of like the take I want to share with you today regarding what migration means and how we can handle migration as an academic question as well as a practical question. So we shouldn't forget few key things in understanding migration. One is that dynamism and insecurities and how they change. These are temporal in a sense, and they are also space-bound, so they are spatial. So they change across the world. You see different, kind of experiences in different parts. And of course, these are moderated by so many factors. So if we go back to the initial theoretical discussion, I highlighted Zollberg's emphasis on inequalities. This is where it comes, like insecurities are sourced from these inequalities. So we have inequalities across the world. These are like, if you look at GDP per capita as a very crude, indicator of, let's say, wealth or welfare, you can see those countries around, with GDPs around $15,000–16,000 a year, have roughly a balanced migration, picture. So they have similar numbers coming in, similar numbers going out. So if you go higher up, higher than 16,000, you see, higher net migration figures. And if you go further down, net immigration. And if you go further down to like $5,000, $7,000 levels, you will see more out migration is taking place than in migration. So this is one level of inequality you can easily spot. And of course, within countries, you have these, classes, like, we have these Gini index scores. You can look at any country. So the higher the index score, you will see like, migration pressures are increasing for those groups suffering from that inequality. Let's say in US, Mexico, Chile, and Turkey, within OECD countries, we had, for example, the difference between top 10% of the income scale compared to bottom 10% were about 16, 17, 18, or 20, 21 times higher. So in those countries, you see like lower middle income groups are feeling or involving more, or propensity of migration is higher among these groups because they are getting the kind of brunt of this inequality in a sense. But of course, it doesn't have to be just economic. So you see political motives sometimes being dominant. And as I play between these economic, political, personal, cultural, etc. Variables here, it is important to understand these are often multiple factors playing into the same, migration moment. So I usually joke, like, have you ever seen any refugee who is not interested in money or shelter, house or food? So if this latter set is making it economic migrants, all of them are economic migrants, or vice versa. And many people like worker, labor migrants, etc., we call them, they have some political motivations as well. And when you look at many surveys among migrants coming from relatively traditional societies, countries, women are less likely or less interested in going back compared to men. So why is it the case? It's the same economy, same politics. Why? Because treatment of women is worse in those countries. So women see that and experience that difference. So they don't want to go back to something worse. So that is like, we have all these elements are, in kind of like working together. So it is never one or, or the other. So calling anything economic migrants or political migrants whatsoever is simply wrong, at least inaccurate. So what moderates migration? Apart from these inequalities, you can identify, demographic inequalities. I call it 3Ds. Probably you have seen. I will share at the end of this conversation. I have to go, by the way. But Camelia, I think you will be able to share these two videos that will add more to what I'm trying to tell you now. And I have to thank you, all of you guys. It is a great program. I wish you success. And I will try to be in touch and try to contribute in the future as well. But I have a little wonderful lady waiting for me, 5 years old at school gates. I have to go and collect her now. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Professor. This has been wonderful. I'm sorry that we don't have the time with you now, but hopefully, can you hear me? Hi, I wanted to,
Yes, Professor.
Who can hear you?
Mute.
Go ahead.
The microphone is closed. Dr. Raj.
Unmute.
oh, sorry.
Yes,
Sorry, just to very quickly say how interesting and how it has really given us a lot of food for thought, because we cannot take these concepts for granted. We really, because they will have policy implications. If we always say migrants are moving because of economic reasons and so on, so then the policies will make these countries develop, put some development aid and so on. So I think it's very, very illuminating and thought-provoking. Thank you very much indeed. Is he gone? Bye. Sorry, where am I now? Am I muted?
No, you are audible.
And now you're muted.
Dr. Raj, unmute.
He probably didn't hear
Yes,
what I
yes.
said. Oh, I'm
Oh.
so sorry. So we'll have to send him a note. Okay, so are you interested in watching? How much time do we have? We have about 15 minutes. Would you like to listen to a short video that he did on the drivers of migration? It's a YouTube. I don't know if it's 9 minutes, 10 minutes, or shall we just go into discussion? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear, Dr. Raj.
Dr. Raj, it seems that the chat was blossoming with some comments. So I don't know whether it would be a good opportunity to touch on some of these and then see maybe towards the end to play the video. I don't know if you managed to have a look, and maybe there were also earlier some hands that were being raised. I don't know if there were some students who had precise some questions. We can take advantage of having, our key resource people here maybe to respond to some of the questions participants may have. We can't hear you, Dr. Raj. I think you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I think somehow it's going back into mute. Am I still muted?
This is perfect. You are.
Oh.
We can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So if that's the consensus, we will do. I can see there are quite a few interesting questions and observations in the chat box. If I could just take advantage of what we listened to him to help students and us as to what sort of challenges he has posed to us. It's very interesting, although he has spoken more on the theories, conceptual part as to how the various theories of migration are taken for granted. And we also say that the reason people move is because they're looking for better opportunities. I mean, this has been the old time mantra. But I think he's going more deeply into and giving different countries experiences that people are not moving not necessarily to get economic benefits, but those economic reasons are actually played by underlying reasons. For example, if there are insecurities, not political, social insecurity, emotional, then you're looking for a way out. And if it's possible for you to get be that way out, then you will leave. Now, you see, the thing I have in mind is that if we look at these theories, this is a critical reflection of what we already know about the various theories on migration. So if we look at it critically, then it will have very serious policy implications. We are saying people are moving, they come to take over jobs, it's because of inequality. Yeah, we know it's because of inequality. But if we say they're moving because they can't find a job in their home country, so they'll go somewhere else where there are jobs. Now, if we keep that as a reason and not digging and not understanding migration behavior. So I think he's saying that we have to go underneath why people are migrating, okay? What are the aspirations? Not all aspirations are fulfilled. Everybody wants to do certain things, but not everybody can achieve those things in reality. So he has, and the conflict, I like this thing, the model of conflict, how that actually plays into or becomes a driver of migration. But I think perhaps I would suggest that since this is on looking at concepts differently, right? And I think it's a challenge that we are not just taking what is already given to us, but we're looking at it more critically, and that new theories are coming about why people move, although the classical theories remain valid. That sometimes, or most of the time people move, there is mobility. And that the thing that he has pointed out is that mobility is not static. People just don't move one time or they have found their dream destination. It's circular. Sometimes they move somewhere, they come back to their home country or their country of origin. They have whatever issues, then they look for other areas where they can go. So in fact, in humanity or in people, mobility is inbuilt. If we understand that mobility is inbuilt, it's not always dictated by the situations and circumstances. We like to move, experience, and so on. There are very different reasons people move, because it's not because they have a better lifestyle. Sometimes rich people, they go to villages because they can find some solace, they can find some peace. So there is that's the sort of geographic mobility, because there is mobility is geographic, mobility is economic, mobility is social. It's like leaving something behind to go for something better, I will see. Why we move is to go for something which is better than what we leave behind, at least in our mind, in our perceptions. We may not experience, we may not get what we thought we would get in a destination country. And then that sets in different kinds of unhappiness or discontent. And then you look back and you make another move. So what has come out very clearly for me, and I will give a chance I will look at Paddy, can you guide me? What are the questions that have been raised? So what has come out clearly, that migration is not static. People just don't move and settle in England or in the US or in Europe. They look around. If their expectations are not fulfilled, they are not going to stay there. So it's the perceptions. If the perceptions of moving were not fulfilled, then they have to look for somewhere else where they can, if they can. Not everybody can move. So I think this is an ongoing. And the other thing that I liked very much was that we have to see migration as a dynamic process where there's circular migration. Often, in some cases, there's a force, people have to leave because they're on contract conditions, terms. So they can be in a country for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. After that, they must leave to go back to their country of origin. And from then, they will be looking for either to go back to the same place or to go elsewhere. So there will be mobility. Now, the question that I have, I would have asked him that, if there is mobility all the time, how come now mobility in Europe has come down, or mobility from Europe to elsewhere has decreased, okay? Although mobility within Europe is there. So people within Europe are moving from Belgium to Germany, or Germany to Paris, or wherever. So there is some kind of mobility. Is there a time when people have got all what they wanted and they feel there's no need to move? Is there a time when that happens? And as he gave the example, people who retire, they don't want to retire in their own country. They go somewhere there's sunshine or where there are beaches and so on. Now, that kind of mobility will not have very serious impact on the receiving country, because you will have a handful of people. So that's the question I wanted to ask him. When does mobility of people becomes a sort of significant to cause social, economic, and other changes, cultural changes in the receiving society, which will then impact the way people react to migrants, or the way they react to people who are in their country, the others. So when does the notion of otherness comes in? Is that when the culture, social issues, perhaps not so much the economic issues, become pertinent? So I think it's a fluid. The whole thing is there's a lot of fluidity, but I think it's important the take for me, to takeaways is that migration is not static, it's a dynamic process, and we still don't understand why people move. We may have some superficial understanding of why people move for economic, social, political reasons, but does it stop there? Do they just stay there, or do they remain quite unhappy? And that's where they bring in the transnational ties. That's where diaspora and the transnationalism comes in. And I think something that they don't get where they have gone, they are trying to get where they left, from where they left. So hence, I think this whole notion of transnationalism becomes quite pertinent, quite significant, because psychologically you may not be there where you decided to settle or whatever reasons you had. And therefore you have those ties in the country of origin, which could give you emotional and some kind of cultural, emotional, at the same time, social support and networking and so on. Okay, so Paddy, is there anything that we still have a few minutes that we could, yeah, we still have 5 minutes.
Questions, and we have also, yeah, thank you, Dr. Raj. And we have also requested the students to raise hands if they would like to ask a question. We're also conscious that we have kept participants today for an hour and a half, but for very important reasons, for us to launch the program and for us to listen to Unit 1, which, as you heard, as part of the social contract that we have and as part of encouraging a learning environment, is very important for us to be present. So your questions are always welcome. I think some of the reflections also that Dr. Raj has shared can be transferred to the Google Classroom a little bit later on by, you know, pasting some of these reflections. So please use that space as an ongoing space where we deliberate and reflect. I see that there is a question that came in I mean, there's some logistical questions, which yes, we will respond to those. We just take time now to respond maybe to more the contextual questions, because we've just had a very rich discussion. So Tapiwa is asking, and maybe, you know, I'm looking at Professor Camelia, I'm looking at Professor Binod here as well, and other resource people in the room. The question is whether we have a theory that speaks to the intrinsic and extrinsic drivers of migration. So is there a theory that speaks to the, I may probably not reading that English word correctly, intrinsic and extrinsic drivers of migration? Tapiwa, do you want to come on and ask your question in less than 30 seconds so we can be able to answer you? And while Tapiwa is coming on, I see Mr. Mahabul, you have raised your hand. I will ask you to ask your question in half a minute, and if you can be punctual to the question so that our resource persons can be able to answer you. You have the mic.
Thank you. Just my quick question, because I find the conversations are very interesting. Especially, I want to thank to all my the professors and the experts. I find here one thing, that is, in globally we saw that there are several challenges, and also like if I make an example, insecurity, it has many options, many parts of insecurity. So how we holistically we can see it, and what would be the key mechanism to cope with it? Because in specific, if I see in Africa, there are lots of challenges in country to country, political, economical, so many challenges are. And so if I'm not using this pull and push, as Professor mentioned it, that don't use pull and push, is so many all of this academical year, but people are moving, which is the true, and that this is the destiny of them. I'm not saying that it's always happening in a bad sense, but it has a positive sense also. So I'm sorry that I'm taking it long, but what would be the global, what would be the way forward from there? If I say that, what would be the expert thinking about? Thank you.
Professor Binod, did you want to take that in about a minute?
Yeah, well, I should take less than a minute, since you know, I would like to listen more than speak. I think that's a very interesting and important question in terms of, you know, global challenges of insecurity, and you know, in terms of thinking of drivers, I think all drivers actually do not end up in creating migration. So we have to think in terms of drivers and triggers. You know, the trigger is the ultimate thing, like the last straw on the camel's back. You know, that I think is very, very important to understand in terms of aspirations. Well, aspirations will create a willingness to migrate, but that may not be converted into actual migration, actual movement, because there is something called ability that may be lacking. So if I wear my economics hat, then I will make that distinction between willingness and ability. And I would tend to think that a larger set of people are willing to migrate. A smaller subset of that can actually or would like to migrate. And that is so far as voluntary migration is concerned. I'm not talking about forced migration. That some of the comments I could see that somebody was posting that climate change is a trigger. Climate change can be triggered, but I would tend to think that in fact migration can lead to climate change. Urbanization, for example, and burning of coal, for example, in household cooking. And that brings me to Sarkis's point about the decision-making unit. Is it the individual or is it the family? That we need to think. And if it is the family, what is the hierarchy within family? What is the role of women? Are women, overpowered by the men folk within the family? That is a variety of societies that we find. There are matrilineal societies also, even in India, in the northeastern state of Meghalaya, you will find it is a matrilineal society. And that's where you will find that the women call the shots rather than the men. So I think we have a lot on our plate to actually look at and discuss over the next 6 months. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Professor Binod. Mr. or Ms. Tapiwa Mucheri, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. So when I posed the question, I'd been reflecting on the presentation, wherein the presenter indicated issues of safety, inequality, independence as some of the drivers that causes migration. So I was wondering if we are able to categorize these to say who's pushing someone to undergo migration or that probes migration, and what are those issues that are external to oneself that are caused by the environment, situation, and other players and other actors and other things, so that when we do come up with policies to address issues of migration, we're able to distinguish between what is within you, what is coming, and what has been caused by you, and what the environment causes. So that's why I was talking of extrinsic and intrinsic. I hope my question is clear now.
I think your question is very clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Mucheri. And the name for me, Tapiwa, coming from Zambia, just next door to you, could apply to either. So very nice to meet you, my brother, and good to be here. Professor Camelia, may I turn to you for a response to that question?
Well, very briefly, I haven't read anything on intrinsic and extrinsic reasons of migration. Maybe you can develop such a theory yourself after this course. We expect it to be creative. However, we do have a lot of theoretical approaches that explain the links between migration and development. And I think maybe this is what you're pointing to. When we think that maybe development has a very big role in why people are migrating. So there are very clear reasons. Professor Serkechi talks about ongoing conflict, slow conflict, and then there are crises. So you may be worried about your neighbor who is very annoying to you. You may be worried about the relationship with the family, and this is not really a big crisis, but it's something that is annoying in your country of origin. So some people do not migrate because of big crises. You know, there are migrations that are planned. So they are planned because of this small or I would say intrinsic, if I understand well, reasons. And maybe extrinsic is what big crises are provoking people to migrate. So this is my interpretation. We can talk about it later during the course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Camelia, and we look forward to some interaction. I see a question here from Mr. Ghosh that is centered around Europe, and I want maybe to challenge a bit of us. You know, here we have PhD holders, master's holders, and bachelor degree holders. So the question, and anyone is very free to give us your, your 1 minute, maybe we pick 2 people. It says that Europe is a hotspot of migration from around the world. Why? Is it only economic or something else? So I think from what we know and from what we have heard today, does anyone, it's, we are in a closed door. You are welcome to just share from your experience. Those in Europe, those who have understood what migration is like to Europe. So we have different people here. So I was hoping 5 hands would be coming up and I would have to pick. Maybe I go by video. I don't know, Mr. Diaz. Oh, I see. Mr. Diaz, do you want to say something? Please go ahead. Let's just make sure he's able to unmute his mic. And then after we will have Mr. Gambo.
Yeah, I can now.
Yes.
Yeah, I
go
can
ahead.
now. I think, well, this course has been an amazing. I'm really happy to be part of this. I think if we talk about migration mobility, we have to talk about emotions. We have to talk about feelings. We have to talk about the subjectivities. We have to talk about hope. We have to talk about this thing that could be the intrinsic things that move us. So, because sometimes I think we forget about these feelings that push inside to move and to see other kind of perspectives, So I think I have made different documentaries where I show this part of this shape, this perspective from the migration. So just I want to talk about this, and probably the people that are living in Europe now from other countries, that part move them to migrate, to move. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Dr. Diaz, actually, maybe by a quick introduction, and we will hear more from you. You are a student, but you are actually a very resourceful resource that we have in the room. So Dr. Diaz is joining us from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and he's also an independent filmmaker that has directed a film on migrants who come from within, that looks at temporary migration as well in Canada, and the migrant mother. So, you can see the diversity that we have in the room. It's not just an interest to study the subjects, to teach the subject, but is also to get back into the community and collect information. Mr. Gambo, would you like to give a response to that question? Just a minute, I think you're being unmuted.
Thank you,
yes,
thank
can
you,
hear you.
Thank you, Paddy. Yes, I'm happy to be here. Yes, it's interesting. The question, I think we need to look at the drivers of migration in the first place. So, as mentioned in the presentation, inequality is one of the issues that has that kind of the drivers of migration. But then as well, when we talk about inequalities, so we are not only talking about inequality from the context of resources. We equally think of inequality from the context of state protection against some shocks. The shocks could be economic shocks, maybe political shocks, or social shocks. So with that, looking at the inequality index, you find that the European countries, even in European countries, is not all countries there. So you have some countries that are doing better off. So which mainly attracts more migrants from the south. One, because of the trying to bridge that inequality from the economic perspective. That is for the economic migrants, for those that are migrating based on the aspiration principle, aspiration theory, as mentioned in the presentation. Then again, we look at the inequality as related to protection. For example, those that are facing crisis in their countries rush to countries that they feel safer, and they have mechanisms that actually promote their protection and equally have access to can access their rights in a better way. Thank you, Paddy.
Thank you, Mr. Gambo. They're talking about the diversity in terms of motivations, but also in terms of reasons for migration. I think very, very well put. I see that we even had a response. Tinashe, I'll bring you on for really 1 minute because I understand that we are running way beyond time. But just to say, Mr. Kamil Hamati, we saw your response, talking about how it's interesting to see the seasons of migration to the north. To answer the question, migration to Europe is beyond economic. It's also homage and a response to colonialism. So some very interesting dimensions there that we need to unpack. And please, let's feel free to share those reflections in the classroom. Tinashe, over to you. You've got a minute.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. So I sort of concur with the response that has been put in the chat around the historically constituted relations between, the so-called global South and Western Europe, or the global North, as it were. And I think that is sort of a very basic explanatory framework to sort of try to account for this presentation of Europe as a hotspot. But I think one of the areas that we might sort of be missing is the impact or the role of the media in presenting Europe as a hotspot. Because if you look at the latest report on migration, the latest, I think, is the IOM report, it really reflects that intracontinental migration is quite huge compared to intercontinental migration. So you'd find the number of people that are migrating from Africa, for instance, to Western Europe is lower than the number of migrants who are moving within Africa. But the role that media has played is to sort of hyper-sensationalize these mobilities and presentation of Europe as a hotspot, particularly looking at the mobility from Western Africa across the Mediterranean Channel, and how that comes out on TV and on Facebook and so on and so forth. So I think that picture has sort of presented Europe as a hotspot. And obviously, you look at the 2015 so-called migration crisis, it also presented this discourse that Europe was a recipient of this huge number of migrants, because that is what the media has made us to, or is portrayed this crisis to be. But otherwise, for me, I think, yes, there is this movement from other places to Europe, but I think quite a lot of it has been hyper-sensationalized through the media. So I think we also need to sort of interrogate the role of the frames that are created through different platforms in the public discourse, particularly when you're looking at this mobility. So yeah, I do concur with the the notion around the connectivity between the global South and the global North, but also I think we really need to sort of interrogate these sort of observations against what data shows us, because data shows us that Europe is not a hotspot of migration, but there's actually more intracontinental migration that goes on more than intercontinental. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tinashe, for that. And indeed, there are many that make journeys to Europe, but there are many more that stay within their regions and in other parts And I think you've mentioned a very important point there in terms of perceptions that can be created by what is fed to us through the media. And also glad to let you know that at GRFDT, we do have the Migration News, which is a platform that provides different information and tries to cover a wide range of issues. In fact, a few weeks ago, we put out a few of our coverage of the Africa continental, or rather regional, review of the Global Compact on Migration. And this is one of the messages that kept on resounding. Africans are moving within Africa. What are we doing about it before we start pointing the finger across the oceans? So I think you've raised some very important points there on the homework we have to do back at home as neighbors. So I think, yeah, some very good reflections there. And also from my personal front, knowing, having done a few studies that, you know, look at Malawi, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, migration towards South Africa, and you see how that can have quite an importance even from migrants coming all the way from the Horn of Africa. And you would think that Europe is closer. Yes, their numbers are crossing, but there are also some that stay, and we need to study these and understand how we can provide legal pathways. So I think a lot for us to digest, which is why we have 6 months. And at this juncture, we were going to have to ask some students to speak, but I think we've listened to all parts, except maybe, I'm not sure we have touched students in Europe, because we were going to ask for an intro. Mr. Gambo and Mr. Tinashe and Tapiwa, I took for granted that you were somewhere in my mother continent. And I think we have also heard from our counterparts from Asia, but I don't think we heard somebody from Europe. Just for representation, you know, you need to put your footprint here. Yes, Mr. Camille, you are based in Switzerland. Thank you. Everybody is well represented. Asia has to go to sleep because it's very late. So with that, we would just like to say thank you very much. We were going to ask Mr. Diaz, because we had asked you to say 1 or 2 words. Could you manage to just tell us a little bit about your documentary? So you take off your academic hat and tell us what you do with this independent filmmaking, because we would like to encourage others to share with us some of your, what you would call hobbies or interests, you know, whether it's along the area of migration or something we can, you know, learn along as we go around the 6 months. Dr. Diaz.
Well, I discovered that write a papers is very good, but make a movies is better, because you can spread your words and your feelings in other public and talk direct with migrants and collaborate more in horizontal way. So I like to do that kind of research, like more collaborative research. So it's a tool for sure. Documentaries is a tool, and then you can open discussion in different ways with migrant workers, with policymakers, with governments, when they want to listen. In many times they don't want to listen and they don't want to see my movies, but it's an option. So also in the last movie that we will have the chance to watch in this course, this movie also helped the woman to talk as a therapy, you know, because it's very deep. It's not just that I make a movie, I shooting, and then I move. It's a process. I have been in touch with one of them in the last 10 years, and it's in a process. So the movie helped as a therapy to talk things that they never talked before during these 10 years of BMI grants. So also it's a communication between the children. When they watch the movie, they see things that they never think that their mom live in Canada or overseas, you know. So it's a powerful tool to express, to talk, to think, to reflect, to deconstruct ideas and feelings and many things else. So I think we will have more time during the course to talk about these movies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diaz, for that. And indeed, there's power in the visual arts, and we encourage those visual arts to be brought into the space here as well, because that's the way we can express, and in, you know, in times and in places, it has also been used as a place of showing distress. So I think it's very important that we bring out those skills as well. Please feel free to share the resources that are also related to this unit that you see around in the classroom. That is why we have the platform. And indeed, hello to everyone who is, you know, just popping into the chat as well. Thank you for being here with us. With that, as we come to a close, I would like to ask Dr. Karine from ADEPT platform to just give us her closing remarks and yeah, usher us out of this amazing room. Dr. Karine.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Paddy. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So my name is Karine Sudu. I am the Executive Director of ADEPT, the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform. And I must say that it's quite a daunting task to close such an engaging and exciting session. It has been a pleasure to listen to Professor Sirkechi, and I think that it was probably the best possible start for this program. As you can imagine, this certificate program cannot be a success without you. So we count on you to share your knowledge, your expertise, your experience on migration-related issues. Don't hesitate to challenge us, and we will do the same, because we believe that this initiative has to be a learning experience for everybody, including the 4 organizing partners. So I would like to welcome you again on behalf of the organizing committee, and I wish you a lot of success. Over to you, Paddy.
Thank you for those precise closing remarks. And I see somebody in the chat being very excited about ADEPT. And yes, indeed, we will be sharing all the links. Iman has mentioned that, you know, that she found out about the course with working with Sudanese doctors abroad, and they coordinated with ADEPT through the UK chapter. So you can see the linkages that we have in this migration space and the wealth of information. So we're looking forward to you to engaging, Iman, when we begin to speak, you know, about skills mobility and what issues related to diaspora and migration governance. Thank you very much, everyone, for having joined us. Asia and the Pacific, thank you for your tolerance for this late time in the night. And thank you to everyone who's just waking up. And, you know, I think we have given you a punch to start your day in the Americas, and it's afternoon in Europe. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to the same spirit continuing, and even much more of the students joining us for all the sessions that we will have. A lot of questions around the attendance form. It's just been posted. And I think Rakesh will come back again to any other questions that are related to schedules, registration, why can't I see my Google Classroom, and so on. Please, the man of the moment is Rakesh. I can't answer the questions more than he can. I would just direct you. So thank you for all the private messages that are also coming to me, but I hand you back again to Rakesh. If you could send him an email, I'm sure he will be more than glad to direct you the right way. Thank you again to all the organizers and the representatives.
Can we have a screenshot of
yes, we need I think we need a picture, isn't it? We should have done it. We should have done it in the beginning, I was thinking. Yes, let's go ahead with the picture.
Yes, all are requested to just open your camera for a few seconds. We'll take a screenshot and thank you so much. We'll meet again.
Thank you. And the man of the moment that has not been introduced is the one who has just spoken. When you have seen emails coming saying convener@grfdt.com, that is our most prestigious Dr. Sada Sahu. And he's a wealth of knowledge. You will hear him in the lectures. Plan not to miss that one. He's an inspiration to all of us, and the reason why a lot of us are here. And I think I can speak for many who are in the organizing committee we stumbled upon this room, like many. He dropped an email to you, and somehow there's a magnet around Dr. Sada. You just end up showing up if he asks you to show up. So we are here because he brings us together. And thank you also. We have many other people in the background from the different organizations that have put a lot of time into this. I do not see Dr. Larissa Lara. We have been missing your face today. There she is.
Yes.
Thank you, Paddy.
She is from iDIASPORA IOM, another resource. Actually, very soon you'll be hearing her speak in one of the units. So we are just looking forward to this being, you can hear everybody is a doctor except for myself. And you know, I'm hanging around with doctors. They say it's infectious, so watch the space. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. Have a good day.
Thank you, Paddy, and thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for contributing.
Thank you.